The leak that night made no sense. It started as a thin shine under separator B, just a smear that should have run off with the rain, but it clung and edged the wrong way. It slid uphill on the grating. I watched it creep toward the noise of the pump skid, like it had a reason. I know how that sounds. It looked small. It looked like nothing. I went for a rag. It rained hard all shift. The kind that turned your hood into a funnel and your gloves into weight. The decks shook under the pumps. The flare stack popped. The lights had that weak halo look you get in weather. It was late. Most of the day crew was down. It was me and Luis and the boardman inside. We had a maintenance tag on line 3, so pressures were weird, but not wrong. Gauges twitched like they do, then settled. I still had to do rounds. Under B, the pressure gauge needle flicked in a way I did not like. It tapped the stop and fell, like a heartbeat. Then again, and again, I radioed it in out of habit. Bored. You seeing the twitch on B? Static. Then nothing. I stepped a bit to the left and tried again. You reading me? Hiss. Dead pocket. We had those in rain. Not new. I made a note. The smear ran under my boot. I took the rag and tried to wipe it, but the rain did that for me. Only it didn't. The sheen broke into dull rainbows, then turned dead black like it soaked the color. I could see my light die on it. It pulled in shadow. I thought maybe I was tired. I was tired. I leaned down to check the drain for backup and breathed in the stink. The surface of the little pool rose in a bump toward me, like a bubble, but it didn't pop. It reached. I pulled back fast and it flattened. I tried again, slower, and held my breath. Nothing. I exhaled and the skin of it lifted toward my face. I felt the cold off it through the rain. I said out loud, because talking kept you steady out there, "No way you're doing that." Something in the panel behind me clicked. The radios crackled, then hissed out. The needle on B did a quick drop and knock. Valves knock when they see a change. We all know that sound. But this sounded like someone tapping back. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, even. I put my hand on the valve body. It hummed under my palm. The taps lined up with my pulse. I took my glove off and put 2 fingers under my jaw. I counted taps. Same rate. I laughed once, short. I thought of bad coffee. I put the glove back on. "Luis, I've got a bad leak at B. I need eyes," I said, walking away from the drain. I got 2 steps and hit another dead radio spot. Just hiss and a faint voice that was not clear, like someone talking through a towel. I moved around the skid until I found a live pocket. "Say again," came Luis. Faint, chopped. "Come to B. Bring pads." Static. Then nothing. I went back. The smear had grown. Not wide. Taller. The black gathered where the grating came together, like it didn't like the gaps. It built up in a wet knob and then stretched, drawing itself up. It made a shape like a column without edges. It stood as tall as my knee. The light from my headlamp died inside it. It didn't reflect. It just took it. I could see rain hit it and slide inside. I could hear the pump skid humming, and when I stepped, it leaned toward my boot. It pushed toward the vibration. I walked back 2 slow steps and it sagged. I stamped my heel and it stiffened and bent toward me. I stopped and held my breath and it eased. I breathed out and it tilted. I waved my hand and it swayed after. My mouth went dry. "Luis, get here now," I said, soft, as if it could hear. Then I remembered it liked sound, so I shut up. I did what you do. I went around to the block, spun the hand wheel, and began to close the feed. The wheel felt gritty. The gauge on the downstream side twitched and then vibrated fast. The valve body knocked, again with that steady beat. Tap, tap, tap. The knock sped up when I worked the wheel. I stopped and it slowed. I pulled a wrench for the small bleeds and cracked one. It spat and then coughed thick. I closed it. My heart felt too big in my chest. The knock kept time. I tried to route it to the closed drain. I opened the drain valve and traced the drain line with my light. The drain ran low along the skids to a catch. I couldn't see much through the rain. I stuck a finger in the open port and felt flow. Then I felt something else. Cold. Not cold like steel. Cold like ice water with no water. It slid over my glove finger and tightened. I yanked back. The glove came back with a black ring where it had touched, stained deep. I rubbed it on my pants. It did not smear off. The rain washed over it. It did not wash away. Luis came around the stair and walked into my light. "What's the problem?" he said. Then he looked. "No, man." We both watched it. The black on the grating had pulled itself higher, up to my thigh now. It swayed with the deck, but when the flare popped, it pushed toward the sound. When Luis spoke, it inclined our way. He took 2 steps back. I put my hand out. "Stand still," I said. "It's oil. It can't stand up," he said. "I see it," I said. We were quiet. Rain hit our hoods. The pump skid hummed. The radios hissed. The valve body kept that steady tap. Tap, tap. "It's hearing you breathe," he said, voice small. He put his glove over his mask and tried to breathe through his nose. It tilted toward him anyway. He backed into the stair. He looked at me. "Pads," he said, like he just remembered, and he ran. He came back with a bag of absorbent and a can of foam. He tossed me the bag. I dropped pads all around the base, and it soaked into them like water, then pushed right through and climbed the edges, like the fibers were a ladder. The pads darkened and went flat. The surface went glossy, then dead. Luis sprayed foam on the column and on the grating. The foam muffled the sound of the rain. The column shivered like an animal. No, not like that. Like something reacting to pressure. It crumpled and then surged, pushing through the foam, following the spray line back toward the can. Luis cursed and dropped it. His glove was slick. The foam hose buzzed where it lay. The black ran along it like it felt the vibration. "Kill the feed," he said. "I tried," I said. "It's knocking." He ran to another wheel and spun it. The gauge on that line jerked low, then jittered. All the needles I could see twitched like they had a tremor. The radios hissed loud, then cut, then hissed. I hit my mic and yelled, "Board! Shut everything! ESD! Now!" The speakers cracked in my ear. For a second I heard a voice. A woman maybe, or just bleed from shore. Then it was just the ocean in a tin can. I tried another channel. Nothing. We did the next thing. We tried to steer it to the flare. I knew it moved towards sound and draw. The flare stack, even in rain, had draft. If I could pull the headers, bleed them, maybe it would climb the path. I knew I would get written up if it worked. I didn't care. "Get inside and prep for forced flare," I said to Luis. "I'll feed it." He shook his head. I'm not leaving you." "Go," I said. "I need you to light it." He nodded. He went. I was alone with the column. It had grown to my waist. It leaned between me and the pump skid. The light from my headlamp died in it. When I took a step, it tilted after. I could hear, under the rain, the wet sound it made when it moved over the grating, like boots in mud. I felt sick. I stamped my heel again and walked backward, slow, toward the flare line manifold. It followed. I took long, slow breaths. It followed my chest like a dog. No, like a meter moving with changes. I kept my hands steady. I did not run. Behind me, the valves began to knock again, faster. The pumps thumped. The knock and thump fell into a pattern that made my skin crawl. It matched me. Tap thump. Tap thump. I made myself breathe slower. It slowed. I did not like that. I kept going. The manifold sat under a short cover. The rain came in sideways anyway. I found the bleed handles with my light and cut them, one by one. Gas hissed. Even with rain, I smelled it. The column snapped toward the new sound. It flowed low along the grating to the hiss. I watched it split like a puddle in a road and then gather again, edges curling up, and it climbed the outside of the pipe. Against gravity. The last of the rainbow in the runoff went black as it touched. My light made a tunnel on it and then died. I waved the lamp. It ate it up. "Now," I said into the mic. "Now." Hiss. I banged a wrench against the manifold to call it, and it surged. It came up to my boot and over the steel toe, thin and quick. Cold went through my socks. I jerked and it climbed faster, up my ankle inside the boot, my calf. No pain, just pressure, wet, tight. I kicked the boot off and my foot came out bare. My sock stayed. The boot rolled. The black came out with it like a tongue and then went back to where the wrench hit. I hopped, jammed my bare foot into the other boot, and moved back. I couldn't stop shaking. The radio popped. "Ready," I heard. "You there?" "Light it," I said. "Light it and keep it lit." "Copy." The flare stack groaned. The igniters fired tired. The flame took, played weak at first, then tore up the rain in a long whoosh. The sound of it filled my teeth. The column stiffened. It bent away from me and toward the upward pull. It gathered itself thin, like it wanted to be a rope, and it slid up the pipe cladding, then into a flange seam, then along the exterior, always upward. The rain hit it and ran through. I opened more bleed valves. I fed it. It climbed. Louis called. "It's not climbing. I don't see flow." "It's exterior," I said. "Trust me." I heard him swear. I heard the boardman say something I didn't catch. Then I didn't hear either of them. The radio cut mid-word. It was just hiss again. I yelled into it, "Say again." Nothing. I thought of them inside. I thought of how the drains crisscrossed under the floor. I thought of how the air moved through the HVAC louvers. I thought of pressure. I kept opening lines. I kept banging the wrench. The column went past me, up the flare ladder, hugging the metal. It made a sound now like quiet breathing, like my own through a mask. The flame faltered. It popped and went low. "Keep the fire," I said, useless to the dead radio. I could feel the heat on my face, even in the rain. The black line rolled over the last rung, then up into the throat of the stack. It went into the light. For a second the flame choked like someone put a lid on it. It went dull and then bright again, higher, The stack shrieked as water flashed and crude burned. The hair on my arms singed through the wet. The sound beat at my ribs. I stepped back until my calves hit a pipe. Something touched my palm. Cold. I looked down. The glove had a thin seam of black at the wrist where the cuff folded. It moved. It slid under the fabric on my skin. I swore and ripped the glove off with my teeth. The seam broke in little lines, like threads all black. I shook my hand hard. I scraped my skin on the grating. It left a stain that didn't smudge under rain, just sat there, shiny and then dull. I wiped and wiped. My hand stank like tank bottoms. The flame held. It roared steady at last. The pressure gauges near me steadied. The valve bodies went quiet. The deck quit knocking. B settled. The column did not come back down. I waited. I didn't move. The rain washed my hood flat to my head. My breath steamed inside the mask. The world narrowed to the sound of the fire and the water. Luis didn't answer the radio. The board didn't either. I went inside. The door pushed back hard with the air. Inside it smelled like hot dust and wet rubber and something else, heavy and sweet. The control room lights were on, but the corners looked wrong, darker than they should. My boots printed water on the tile, then dark. The dark did not go gray as it dried. It stayed. I followed the hallway into the locker room. Luis's wet prints ran ahead of me, men's size. Maybe his, maybe someone else. And they went from wet to black. They hooked left. I followed. He wasn't there. Nobody was. I stood and rubbed my prints with my glove. The black did not smear. It stayed, like a brand. I wanted to wash them, but I did not touch water. I found the boardman in his chair with his head down on his arms like he fell asleep. I touched his shoulder and he slid off slow and hit the floor good. He was breathing. His radio hissed near his ear. His headset cable was black where it crossed his neck. A thin line ran into the foam of his ear cup. I pulled it off. The foam stuck. His ear was clean. The line went into the plastic. I threw the headset and it rattled under the desk. I wanted to pick him up and I didn't know how. I went back outside. The flame cooled to steady. The rain drilled down. The deck took on a shine again that looked like water, not like a dead eye. I looked for the standing thing. I didn't see it. I saw long streaks where it had been, all in the direction of the stack. I touched one with my boot and it didn't move, didn't smear, didn't wash. I left a black toe mark on my boot rubber that stayed. I tried to wipe it with a rag and the rag took it, and then the rag turned dull. My hands hurt. The helicopter came morning. It beat the rig to a tremble. They took statements. They looked at gauges. They ran checks. They made faces when they saw the footprints. They didn't see any standing oil. Of course not. They asked if I had hit the flare with liquid. I said yes. They wrote it down. They sent me to the bunk and then they sent me home because I couldn't stop shaking and I smelled like crude and rain. I sat in my apartment after a shower that did nothing. I wore sweatpants and a shirt and a towel over my shoulders. It still rained. It hit the window in slow taps that turned to a pattern if you listened. Knock. 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 Even. The same as the valves. The same as me. I told myself to stop. I told myself it was just rain. I went to the bathroom and looked at my hands under the light. There were pale rings around my wrists where the glove cuffs had been stained. I had scrubbed hard. The rings were still there, like thin bruises. I leaned in, close, and breathed on my skin. My breath smelled like tank vents. I recoiled. I leaned in again, slower, and watched the pores on my wrist. That's when it happened. A thin black line slid out from the inside of my ear, from the spot where the foam plug sat all night, and ran across the side of my face toward my neck. It moved slow, not thick, like ink under tape. It reached my jaw and then angled down to the dip above my collarbone. I felt it like a cold finger. It didn't drip. It went flat and then rolled toward the drain in the sink when I coughed. I watched it go, calm like I wasn't there, and then I grabbed a tissue and pressed hard. The tissue took it. The white turned black in a single stroke. The black didn't spread. It held a line. Neat. I dropped the tissue into the sink. The water took the white and left the black. The black slithered, which is not a word I like, but that is what it did, and disappeared down the hole. I stood there a long time with my mouth open. I felt something knock in my chest and I counted. It was me. The rain on the window knocked back. It matched. I put both hands on the sink and looked away. In the mirror, my breath fogged and then cleared. The air tasted sweet and heavy. I said, "Okay," because I did not know what else to say. They said at work that we did good. They said the flare saved the rig. They said power flickered in the control room and the generator hunted, and that's why the radios died. They said the footprints were a chemical and the pad flush. They said the stain on my gloves was additive. They said they double-checked the drains. They said tanks and lines were clean. They sent me a packet on safety and told me to see a doctor if I felt off. I didn't go. I keep hearing the flare when I sleep. The scrape before it catches. The choke. The long pull. I keep hearing the valve knocking, and a clean beat when I lay on my side. When the house is quiet, I can hear something like a whisper under the sink. Not a voice, just the idea of one, like tuned just wrong. The rain on the window sounds like someone rapping on metal 3 decks below me. Tap, tap, tap. Here's the part one didn't put on the report. I think we taught it a path. It liked pressure and sound and pull. We gave it all that and a ladder. We gave it away from the deck to the fire. I thought I burned it. I stood in that rain and watched it choke, and I thought that was it. I went home clean. But when I see steam on the mirror and I breathe, I can fog a line that goes up and not down. When I lean over the sink, sometimes I hear fluid move with me in a place where there's no pipe. The smell comes up from my lungs when I laugh. The stack didn't kill it. It just learned to use the draw better. Tonight the rain is hard again. It taps steady on the glass. My ear itches in a small way. I scratched and my fingernail came back with a shine. I wiped it on a towel and it left a black streak that did not wash out. I turned on the tap and leaned close. I could feel cool air on my cheek like something waiting. I held my breath. The knocking slowed. I breathed out, and the thin line moved toward the drain. It went easy, like it knew where to go. I'm telling you because you ask why I smell like the plant now, why I jump when the flare pops, why I flinch when the radio hisses. I'm telling you because next time you're on nights and you see a leak that runs uphill, you don't put your face near it. You don't call to it. You don't tap. You don't give it rhythm. It wants vibration. It wants breath. It wants pressure. It will find a path. Even when you think you closed every valve and shut every door, it will come by a way you left open because you did not know your body counted. I wiped my ear again and watched a thin, wet line slip across my jaw, down my neck, and into the sink. The bathroom light flickered like a hand over a flashlight. For a second, the room went dim, not out, just swallowed on the edges. I held the counter and waited. The light steadied. The rain tapped. I heard the rest of the house go quiet in the way it does just before the generator picks up. I could feel the air pull down the drain with my breath. The flare taught it a new route. So did I. I hope you enjoyed that one. Sometimes these stories stay with you longer than you expect. If you'd like to hear more, subscribe for the next night's story. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe watch another before the lights go out. See you in the next one.